Good afternoon. Dear colleagues, dear ambassadors, dear deputy representative, dear members of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, dear special representative of the United Nations, dear heads of the Director General of Human Rights and Rule of Law, dear guests, dear Julian and dear Gianluca, it's my honor to welcome you in Strasbourg in my capacity as Vice President of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. Let me start by informing you that our exchanges today will be video recorded. Some journalists are present in the room, and we thank them for their interest in this event. Interpretation will be provided all along in English and in French. Let me express our gratitude to the interpreter and to the technicians who are enabling our exchanges today. And before I keep on going with my words, I would like us to observe a minute of silence for the Pope Francisco. As you know, he died last Monday, and he has been one of the world's most important referents and defender of the dignity and the rights of migrants. So please, 1 minute. Last October, our Assembly adopted a resolution on how to clarify the fate of missing migrants. This important step marks the acknowledgement by PACE of the tragedy of missing migrants and the role of Council of Europe in preventing and addressing it. The resolution acknowledges the importance of international cooperation in line with the objective number 8 of the Global Compact on Safe, Orderly, and Regular Migration. Last October, the Assembly aligned itself with the commitment made by the African Commission on Human Rights and Human and People Rights in 2021, and with the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights in 2019. The Council of Europe must be part of international momentum on this issue. Every year, thousands of people go missing during their migration journey. The reality of people going missing in migration is multifaceted and cannot be addressed through only one single policy. The demand for public policies action is real. What can the Council of Europe and Parliamentarians do to address this reality? Our conference today and tomorrow will help gain better insight to discuss exactly this. We are talking about bodies recovered. We are talking about Forensic Institute relying in International Committee of Red Cross donation to keep identified bodies in coolers. We are talking about death which may have been caused by a crime or not. We are talking about managing bodies, burying them. We are talking about informing families so they can grieve and also can, even from abroad, and pay the respect to their deceased loved ones. We are also talking about families or even co-travelers searching for their missing members or friends and never been provided with an answer. We are talking about people confronted with loss. We are talking about dignity, and we are talking about human rights. Your presence today, all of you, is a concrete example of many stakeholders involved to prevent and address cases of missing migrants. I am deeply pleased by the presence of Association of Families of Missing Migrants today. I am grateful for the opportunity to speak not only about them, but also with them. Your presence is very important today here. Colleagues, a structured dialogue between the various stakeholders is urgent, be they state or not state actors. I am hopeful that this conference will help identify avenues to establish such a dialogue. The Council of Europe can be instrumental in this joint effort. The resolution we adopted in October cannot be left unfolded. The situation is too serious to remain just a piece of document in a drawer. Let me insist. As a standard-setting organization, the Council of Europe has already a toolbox of pertinent recommendations adopted by the Committee of Ministers and of conventions signed by a state. Much work remains to be done, but many tools are there already. What is needed is political leadership to make use of them. We as parliamentarians can help with this. Cross-border cooperation is crucial. If we want to make progress, and I welcome the presence here of so many delegates from national authority, focal points on missing migrants are an essential component of coordination between ministers, inside country but also across Europe and beyond. European countries are not the only ones impacted by the tragic reality, and I am grateful to guests from Morocco, from Argentina, and also from Senegal to have joined our conversation today. We are talking about a sense of urgency about the global phenomenon and the urge of a global response. Dear colleagues, I have been a member of SPACE for a while. All throughout this year, I can testify of the crucial topic of essential recommendations which are adopted by our Assembly. Too often, however, this work is not enough. We must act as bridge between Strasbourg and our national parliament. Dear guests, families do not give up on seeking information of the whereabouts their missing ones. Examples are sadly many, including in my home country, Spain. Disappearances can be prevented, and I cannot open this conference without stressing the vital need to prevent disappearances along migration routes. Legal pathways, but also adequate resettlement means are essential. Resolution 2569 is a powerful one, and I'm grateful to Julian Palki, who put so much effort in trying to understand what it is that our organization and what parliamentarians can do. Dear colleagues, the issue of missing migrants is an issue of public policy interest. National institutions must act. Finally, many thanks again to all of you for coming to Strasbourg. Some of you from very far away. I am confident that this conference will lay the ground for concrete actions, and I am grateful for the opportunity to be part of it. I wish us all fruitful exchange. Thank you very much. And now I'll give the floor to Mr. Esposito.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, Vice President, parliamentarians, Mr. Palke, Special Rapporteur of the United Nations, and colleagues. I'm truly happy to be here this afternoon to discuss what, as very eloquently the Vice President of the Assembly described as a really important public policy issues. The Mediterranean Sea has been called the largest graveyard on Europe's shores. The IOM Missing Migrants Project has estimated that since 2014, over 30,000 migrants have died or gone missing in the Mediterranean Sea, and over 1,000 on other routes within continental Europe. Many of these tragedies have occurred when ships sank off of the island of Lampedusa, an island I know very well because I spent a lot of my time when I was a child in that beautiful spot. Nearly all these people will have paid smugglers huge amounts of money and endured violence along the way to their death. The statistics are staggering, but we should not forget that behind each number there is a human tragedy. This is why I really warmly welcome the initiative of the PACE Committee on Migration, Refugees and Displaced Persons and you, Mr. Palke, to organize this conference in Strasbourg today and tomorrow. It brings together experts and policymakers, and I'm sure it will create a momentum leading to more effective strategies and action for addressing the issue of missing migrants. I would also like to particularly welcome all the humanitarian efforts pursued by so many NGOs, as well as by the Red Cross and Red Crescent societies on the ground. Voluntary sea rescue operations are provided by several NGOs, like the one that Mr. Palke worked with. There are numerous humanitarian organizations which must be praised for their help to irregular migrants, thereby actively working to prevent that migrants go missing or die on their desperate journey towards Europe. One of the key challenges in finding missing migrants relates to the issue of jurisdiction. Who is competent to investigate the missing? And even when we identify the relevant jurisdiction, do prosecutors have the legal and practical ability to act? Also, as legalistic as this may seem to some, I will always insist on making the difference between trafficking in human beings and smuggling of migrants, too often confused in the public discourse. The latter, trafficking in human beings, always involves a form of exploitation of the victim, which may be, but is not always present in the case of smuggling of migrants. Now, while the two phenomena are legally different, they may at times overlap. And this is actually often the case when we talk about missing migrants. Because migrants go missing for several reasons. They often die, but when they don't, they may end up being absorbed into organized criminal groups which exploit their vulnerabilities for their own benefit. To tackle the phenomenon of missing migrants, international cooperation is key, as was clearly mentioned. I don't think any country alone can tackle it. And might I add, international cooperation way beyond the European Union, and this is why the Council of Europe is relevant here. And for international cooperation to work effectively, national legislation has to be compatible and enable, not hinder, this cooperation. As the Vice President of the Assembly already noted, we have already a number of tools in our toolbox. You mentioned some at the Parliamentary Assembly level. I will mention some at the intergovernmental level, the Committee of Ministers side. Let me just mention the network of prosecutors on migrant smuggling, the national focal points that we have, the platform for the sharing of information on country profiles, the ongoing work that we have right now on defining safe third countries, a guide for practitioners on administrative detention, and all the investments that our development bank is actually making in relation, for example, to housing, healthcare, and school projects for migrants and displaced persons. But I think we can and we must do more, and most importantly, as you said, Mr. Vice President, we have to move from words to action. And I'm very pleased, actually, that the Committee of Ministers, following also the prompt, if you like, by the Parliamentary Assembly, has decided to embark on a new legal text to combat migrant smuggling. We will soon start work on this topic. This new text, will include measures to have more coherent criminal legislation across our member states, more effective investigative tools, but also action to prevent the human rights of victims and to ensure swifter international cooperation. And I wonder, in light of today's event, but also all the work that the Parliamentary Assembly has carried out and its rapporteur, whether the issue of missing migrants should not also be included in this important text and deal with some of the challenges countries face in dealing with missing migrants, starting, as I mentioned before, from the issue of jurisdiction and of prosecutorial action. Now, while this is, of course, for the member states to decide and not for me, I can assure you that we will consider this matter very carefully. After all, what we want is to enable our national authorities to be better equipped to to identify missing migrants. And this future legal text could be just one way of achieving this objective. Mr. President, Vice President, I stop here. I want to thank you and the Parliamentary Assembly once again for this really timely and important initiative, and I wish everyone a successful event. Thank you very much.
Okay, I now give the floor to Julian Palke, who is the person that have the reporters, the important, report about this in the Council of Europe. We really thank him for this great job you did. Thank you. You have the floor.
Thank you so much, dear Vice President of the Parliamentary Assembly, honored excellencies, dear special representatives, dear guests from the ministries, dear representatives of the diaspora, ladies and gentlemen, dear guests. I would like to thank you all very much for coming from all parts of Europe and in some cases even from far beyond. It means a lot to me. But much more importantly, this is a recognition of the dignity of the people on the move, a recognition of the dignity of the deceased, and hopefully a small piece in the puzzle with which we can prevent those who died while fleeing from being forgotten. That they are not forgotten, but that every single person is identified. Before I became a member of the German Parliament, me and many others tried to save people from drowning in the central Mediterranean. We were running rescue ships on the Mediterranean. One day, we came across the body of a woman who had been lost at sea for several days. And despite all our efforts, we couldn't recover her remains because her body was already coming apart. And we waited for hours, hoping for a larger ship with proper equipment would arrive. And we worked so hard to retrieve her because we wanted to honor what was left of her dignity, so that she wouldn't disappear without a trace, so that her loved ones might at least have the chance to know what happened to her. More than 30,000 people have disappeared in the Mediterranean alone over the past decade, and that figure doesn't even account for the deaths on land routes or at borders. We need the commitment of civil society and NGOs to fill this gap, not just for rescues, but also for the recovery after an incident. But in order to ultimately determine a person's identity, where they come from, who their relatives are, we need investigations by authorities. The work of forensic experts, investigations by prosecutors, and yes, police cooperation. But also the compilation of cases in the database and the commitment of NGOs on land to clarify the fate of their loved ones with grieving families. Well, I was writing this report and the recommendations, I was able to see in Greece what such a practice might look like. After the Pylos incident, the recovered bodies were identified by the Hellenic police. And even though many bodies have never been recovered, it is a start and it can mark an outstanding example. Greece has sought contact with embassies of the countries of origin and marked graves where these people were buried. And it is one of the best examples, at least for the migration context, to the state. But it also shows what we lack is not the technical capability or the knowledge of how to successfully identify a person. Above all, what we need is a collective will, and a collective will of all members and all member states of the Council of Europe. And that is why today and tomorrow at this conference we are looking at 4 very complex issues. First, after major disasters, resources are urgently needed, from forensic experts to refrigerated containers to qualified personnel. No state should be left alone with this. And if resources are available in another country, we might have to consider sharing them in urgent situations. Second, the identification is an important but only one aspect, because the families want certainty. After sometimes years of uncertainty, relatives should know what happened to their loved ones and be able to grieve. But for that, they must have a contact point they can turn to. A contact point, an institution they actually trust. And relatives must have the opportunity to travel to the countries where the mortal remains are located, perhaps even to conduct a final identification. But this also means that EU states should make it easier for these relatives to be granted visa. Only in this way we can allow families to bring some closure to this chapter and hopefully find peace within it. Third, I had the honor to meet dedicated organizations and individuals like Pavlos Pavlidis, a forensic scientist in Greece. He identifies people who died in Greece. He collects data, DNA, and images. And I sat in front of many small boxes filled with objects he found on the people. And he keeps every single one of these objects in a small marked bag in one of these many larger boxes. Because it might help determine the person's identity in the future. But all of this data should be collected more centrally. To do this, we need to discuss what a database could look like and what it can do exactly, with full respect to the rights of the people, but still functional enough to enable identification even from a far distance. And fourth, nation states can already make a use of a network today. Many member states have already established national focal points, contact points within ministries. And this should become a network following the Rabat process in which many of the issues we are discussing today will be further addressed and where sustainable solutions are hopefully established among member states. And we want to encourage all member states to appoint such focal points and become active in this network. No state should be left alone in this. European values must be upheld in every state, and these values unite us as Europeans. Dear guests, I'm deeply honored that so many of you are showing such a great interest, and such a conference obviously would not be possible without the collective effort. From the German Ministry of Foreign Affairs for contributing the funding, many organizations that commented on the report, the organizations and individuals that are working on this indeed heavy topic for years or decades and have gathered an incredible amount of experience. And of course, the Secretariat of the Council for organizing this conference together with my former team. Because we are all carried by one ideal that stands above everything else. And as the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, we have adopted this understanding of human dignity with this report, that human dignity applies even beyond death. Thank you.
Bonjour à toutes et à tous.
Good afternoon, everybody. Dear participants, colleagues, it is my honor to introduce this session as Vice President of the Committee on Migration, Refugees and Displaced Persons. The report drafted by Julian Palke, my colleague, a member of the German Bundestag, was an opportunity for the committee to hear much testimony from persons concerned, victims of tragedies, persons involved in searching signs of life or some form of identification. And these hearings proved fundamental for us as members of Parliament in order to better come to grips with the various questions and various challenges that these issues raise and to better apprehend what our role can be when it comes to the efficiency of public policies, when it comes to dealing with the tragic case of missing migrants, far too numerous in number. That is the spirit of the parliamentary visits organised by the Migration Committee in what we referred to as congestion areas, in other words, Calais in October 2023. It's a delegation that I had the honour of participating in, but also Lampedusa, September 2024. Every visit was an opportunity to have an exchange with public authorities responsible for administering ports, for example, prefectural authorities, associations, lawyers, and migrants themselves. And that is the spirit that has prevailed in the work of the committee, and it's the spirit that prevails during this conference. In other words, having an exchange with those who are in possession of knowledge, whether they be public authorities, associations, judicial bodies, international bodies. That, I think, is essential if we're to identify where our contribution can be made whilst respecting the rule of law, fundamental rights, but it is important to enable us to see what we can do in terms of public policies to be put in place in our various jurisdictions. The subject is complex, technical in many regards, profoundly political in sort of almost a philosophical sense of that word, because ultimately what we are talking about is dignity of families and such of information. Dignity in terms of the persons whose bodies have been found, and it is that quest for dignity, I think, that mobilizes professionals and individuals. There are a number of international commitments that have been entered into with a view to upholding that imperative, a quest for dignity, and I would welcome you all here this afternoon. In our panel, we have Mr. Gerhard Madi, who is a special rapporteur from the United Nations on the human rights of migrants, who is currently drafting a report that deals precisely with the phenomenon of missing migrants. After a career as a diplomat, Mr. Madi has been a member of a number of United Nations committees, including the Committee on the Rights of Migrant Workers. Between 2011 and 2023, he was a member of the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child, with a particular focus on the situation and the rights of migrant, refugee and asylum-seeking children. Welcome to you, Mr. Madi. We'll also be hearing from Ms. Julia Black, who is the Missing Migrants project coordinator within the IOM. That's a project she's been coordinating for some 10 years now from the data center of the IOM in Berlin. Through the Missing Migrants project, Ms. Black and her team have contributed greatly to the visibility of this phenomenon of missing migrants in Europe and throughout the world. Welcome to you, Ms. Black. I think it was essential to hear from the families of missing persons, and we have the honour of hearing from the president of the 3rd of October Committee, Mr. Tarek Bran. That's an organisation established following the terrible shipwreck of the 3rd of October 2013 off the coast of Lampedusa, where 368 people perished. Originally from Eritrea, Mr. Brand has been living in Italy since 2005, and has devoted much of his time in recent years to support migrants and the families of those who have disappeared. The voice of the 3rd of October Committee is an important one, and we're happy to be able to count you amongst us, together with associations that defend families of missing migrants. Welcome to you. And finally, we have Mr. Florian van Koenig, who is responsible for advocacy at an international level within the central agency of the ICRC. Mr. van Koenig has worked as a political advisor for a number of UN missions for the World Bank, the OSCE, and also for the European Union. I suggest that we start by giving the floor to Mr. Madi and then Ms. Black, that we take then a few questions before we continue with the statements from Mr. Brand and Mr. van Koenig. Mr. Madi, over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fernandez, for the introduction. Distinguished participants, colleagues, panelists, I would like to thank the Secretary General of the Parliamentary Assembly for the invitation to participate in this important and timely conference. Clarifying the fate of missing migrants in Europe and worldwide should not only be a priority for all of us, but for states, it is an international obligation. Lack of clarification of their fate is an infringement of the human rights of disappeared migrants and directly affects the right to know the truth of their family members due to the failure to adequately investigate and identify disappeared migrants. Before entering into the subject of the approach to disappearances in the context of migration and how to address challenges, I would like to bring to the attention of this assembly the massive scale and root causes of this problem. I will dedicate my 2025 report to the Human Rights Council in June to do a human rights analysis of the phenomenon of missing migrants and introduce specific recommendations, including in terms of policy. Since 2014, at least 65,000 people have died or gone missing while migrating to an international destination, with at least 3,400 being migrant children. In 2023 alone, 8,500 people died or went missing, the highest number recorded since 2014, highlighting the extreme dangers migrants face while crossing seas, jungles, or deserts. The Mediterranean remains the deadliest route, accounting for 30,300 deaths and disappearances in last decade, followed by migration routes across Africa, the Americas, Asia, and Europe. In the absence of sufficient and accessible, regular, and safe migration pathways, pushed by increasingly restrictive migratory policies, migrants continue to embark on the perilous journey in search of dignity and safety. Other factors contributing to migrant missing or disappearance include harsh weather and environmental conditions, lack of adequate shelter, food and water, illness without access to health care, hazardous transportation conditions, lack of access to means of communication, separation of families, pushbacks, lack of capacity and or delay in search and rescue operation, and violence by non-state actors and by borders and law enforcement officials. Migrants may also disappear as a result of abduction for political or other reasons, or in the context of detention or deportation processes, or as the consequences of smuggling and trafficking, including due to collusion between state agents and organized criminal groups engaged in trafficking in persons. Militarization, externalization, and criminalization of migration amplify risks. Pushback practices, immigration detention, family separation, and lack of safe migratory pathways are key contributors to their disappearances. Migrant death and missing raise serious human rights concerns, particularly about right to life, the principle of non-refoulement, the prohibition of collective expulsion, the right to family unity, and the rights to the truth, justice, and accountability. Some missing migrants could be victims of disappearance, including enforced disappearance. The Committee on Enforced Disappearance stresses that the principal distinctive element between a migrant going missing and a migrant become a victim of disappearance is the commission of a crime against migrants. The absence of information about the fate and whereabouts of missing and disappeared migrants causes profound anguish to their families, who are left in a state of prolonged uncertainty, Moreover, when seeking justice, families of missing migrants face numerous barriers, such as limited access to information, fragmented data systems, a lack of interest from authorities in conducting investigations, or complex legal processes, all of which may be worsened by significant psychosocial and financial hardships. It is important to note that states' accountability, and in some cases, complicity in the disappearance of migrants is an issue to be addressed. States tend to prioritize border security over human safety. Those travel irregularly are often neglected of their human rights and become visible to legal systems. Some disappearances amount to enforced disappearances where states are directly or indirectly responsible. Failure to investigate or provide assistance can make states complicit under international law. Finally, impunity is a major concern. Perpetrators, including state actors, often go unpunished. Failure to identify gaps in humanitarian actions and to hold perpetrators accountable, particularly when governmental officials are involved, has led to impunity for crimes against migrants and contributed to the growing of the figures of migrant death and missing. Effective public policy to prevent and address the cases of disappeared migrants is essential to address the concerns I just have highlighted. I'm pleased to be sharing this conference with parliamentarians from member states of the Council of Europe to discuss these matters. Given the transnational nature of this phenomenon, it is essential that states assume national and collective responsibility to preserve the lives of all migrants and prevent migrant deaths and missing. Gaps in the international and domestic frameworks, such as the lack of cooperation among countries of origin, transit, and destination, poor data collection, and inadequate search and forensic procedures, and obstacles to humanitarian access, legal remedies, and truth-seeking mechanisms represent serious challenges. States must commit to cooperate internationally to save lives and prevent migrant death and injuries. Allow me to also to highlight the consequences on the families of the disappeared. Families suffer from prolonged anguish, as I mentioned, economic hardship, and lack of legal status due to absence of official recognition or documentation. Women disproportionately bear the burden of both emotional and economic consequences, and children face psychological and developmental impacts. Colleagues and participants, I would like to address two categories of policies. First, the policy that contribute to migrant disappearance. And second, the policies recommended to prevent disappearances and protect migrant rights. In the first category, state practices or laws that increase the risk of migrants going missing or being forcibly disappeared include a militarized and securitized migration control, the use of military forces and private security at borders, pushbacks, and denial of rescue or disembarkation, deportation agreements with third countries that lack safeguards, and detention in unofficial or secret facilities. B, restrictive immigration policies, lack of safe and regular migration pathways, forcing migrants to take dangerous routes, visa discrimination, criminalization of irregular entry or smuggling, even when linked to humanitarian need. C, immigration detention practices, detaining migrants without judicial oversight or contact with families, detention of children and family separation, and transfer of detainees without registration or notification. Lastly, failure to investigate or identify, lack of forensic capacity, delayed or no recovery of remains, improper labeling of causes of death, and cremation or mass burial without identification procedures. Only through the identification of the existing shortcomings in national and regional approaches to migration, we will be able to better protect the human rights of migrants and prevent their disappearance. The focus of the policies needs to be on 1, prevention and protection. 2, search, rescue, and investigation. 3, accountability and redress. 4, and support to humanitarian action. In this regard, my recommendation is to shift to rights-based approaches by desecuritizing immigration enforcement. Use detention as the last resort and for short stay. Ban child detention. Expand and promote legal pathways and uphold the principle of non-refoulement. It would also be necessary to improve cross-border data sharing, provide adequate resources for search and rescue operation, and ensure efficient and immediate investigation of disappearances. In terms of accountability and redress for the victims and their families, there is a lot of work to do. However, starting with the development of a victim and gender-sensitive reparation, including psychological support, is necessary. Finally, and addressing a recent issue targeting humanitarian workers, states need to decriminalize humanitarian aid to migrants and facilitate and ensure safe operation for NGOs and civil society at borders and detention sites. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Merci, Monsieur Mahdi, pour vos propos.
Thank you, Mr. Mahdi, for your important contribution. It reminds us that it is a worldwide issue. The United Nations and the Council of Europe fight for common values on the planet. I'd like to give the floor, without further ado, to Julia Black from the Missing Migrants Project. Please make sure that you keep up with the time allotted to you this afternoon. Thank you.
Mr. Fernandez, thank you, Mr. Mahdi, and thank you all for being here today. On behalf of the IOM and personally as someone who's worked on this topic for actually closer to 11 years now, congratulations really to the PACE for this really unprecedented report, resolution, and set of recommendations on this topic, and as well for convening this this conference, which I think is, to my knowledge, the first time that decision makers from Europe have convened at this number of people and at this level on this topic. Before, you can see there's some slides. I'm the data nerd in the room. I have a few slides, but before I launch into that, it's just 3 slides. I want to give a little bit of context about who I am and what we do at IOM. So I coordinate IOM's Missing Migrants project, which since 2014 has documented deaths and disappearances on migration routes worldwide. This was, I think, very similar to the Comité de October. It was born in response to the terrible Lampedusa shipwrecks in 2013, which claimed hundreds of lives. But it continues now, and I think it's really an attempt to make visible this issue in some way by documenting at least the minimum number of missing migrants, the number of deaths that we really can confirm. I fear that without this data, this issue would really disappear in the public narrative, as many of these cases would be unrecorded and probably remain unremarked upon in the public discourse. So this slide here you can see is as of last week. In addition to what Mr. Mahdi said, from the end of 2023, I have water, thank you. We have actually now recorded nearly 75,000 deaths in total. It is quite clear, I think, from this chart that this is an issue which affects Council of Europe countries directly, but beyond that also the neighboring countries, which is to say European external borders. This is even graver of a situation there. So in total, we've recorded just over 10,000 deaths within Council of Europe countries and territorial waters. This includes southern states like that border on the Mediterranean. When you include neighboring states, that adds another 40,000 lives lost. This comprises nearly 2/3 of all data that we've documented on missing migrants across the world. It's also quite notable that these deaths are increasing. Since 2020, when mobility was sort of temporarily stopped due to the outbreak of COVID, we have seen a year-to-year increase every year. As Mr. Mahdi said, 2023 broke records. Now 2024 has again broken a record with more than 9,000 deaths recorded for the first time ever. This is a terrible trend. It also in some ways belies the fact that no deaths should be happening at all. So to talk about an increase is a terrible thing. The reality is, and the context is, that these deaths are preventable, and in an ideal world there would be 0 deaths, not 4,000, not 3,000, 0 deaths. I want to emphasize, lest we get sort of lost in the somewhat false idea that these numbers and figures are very concrete, that we actually record a very conservative number of missing migrants. As Mr. Mahdi and others have said, there are many other ways in which migrants go missing that are not necessarily dead. I also want to emphasize the message that we get from this chart is that this is a European issue. And with the steady increase of deaths year to year, this is a growing issue as well. You are seeing here a little bit of a sneak peek of our annual report, which will be released next week. If you're interested, there's a QR code you can scan to sign up. This focuses, of course, on the trends in last year's data and the 2024 data and the kind of unprecedented number of deaths we recorded last year across most regions of the world, but also takes a look back retroactively to look at what turn out to be extremely strong links to humanitarian crises. You can see here that a huge number of these deaths occur in Libya. In total, more than 40,000 deaths have occurred in countries affected by crises. That's more than half of our global total. You can imagine that given the situation in these countries, the lack of access, the difficulty of differentiating a migrant death from another death of a person due to conflict or disaster, that this is a very conservative number. In addition to these 40,000 deaths within countries in crisis, we've recorded another 19,000 people who were fleeing conflict, whose countries of origin was themselves a country in conflict. Notably, we have several thousand Afghans, Rohingya from Myanmar, and Syrians in our database who have died. Here too, the reality of the situation is that about half of all of the individuals whose deaths are contained in our database are unidentified. We don't have a country of origin, and it's extremely likely, in my view, that these people who are fleeing crises are even less likely to be identified and are probably very overrepresented in that big number of tens of thousands of unidentified missing persons. So again, lest we get lost in the numbers, the message here is that, yes, this issue is a European issue, it is a growing issue, it is also a humanitarian issue. Moving on from the data, which provides, I think, important context, we at IOM are increasingly trying to offer solutions, offer our expertise. So we, with our lovely colleagues at the Red Cross, Red Crescent Movement and UNHCR, put together these set of recommendations that were published by the UN Secretary General last December. I'm not going to go into the details of them because you can see them online, but also because they have very much in common with the excellent recommendations that were put out by the Council of Europe last year as well. I do want to highlight what, in my view, are the most actionable kind of low-hanging fruit of these recommendations for European states. The first is to simply nominate a national focal point to do the really unbelievably important job of the transnational coordination, whether that is search and rescue, whether that is identifying a missing person across state borders. In addition, Julia and Palka alluded to the Pira shipwreck, and that was a very big success, and that is because the disaster victim identification processes were mobilized in light of that shipwreck. It is a success story, and it is something that these DVI processes are extant in almost every European state, as far as I'm aware, but they are not systematically being applied in cases of shipwrecks or other mass casualty events when it comes to migration. So these are two steps that I think every country could implement in the very short term to have a huge impact. This is the ends of my slides, but just to wrap up, I do think that, working on this project for as long as I have, of course, I do firmly believe that our data is a part of solving this crisis, but it is just one piece of this puzzle. IOM increasingly is really seeking to operationalize the insights we get from the Missing Migrants Project data set, but we can't do it alone. We need states to partner with us on this. IOM's new strategic vision has saving lives as its very first priority. We are increasingly working on policy processes like sitting here with you today, but also through the Rabat and Khartoum processes. We will be developing new guidelines on missing migrants with the African Union this year. We have also launched what we call affectionately the Missing Migrants Incubator, which really seeks to take IOM's very strong presence in the field in many of these humanitarian countries in particular to really provide operational responses to issues linked to missing migrants. But we can't do it alone. We need the support of states, and we need all of you in this room to end the growing death toll. This is a European issue, it is a humanitarian issue, and I really fear that unless we step up and act now, that this issue will continue to grow. Thank you.
Merci, Madame Black, pour votre intervention, pour vos travaux.
Thank you very much for your essential work. You highlighted the frightening trend, i.e. the increase in the number of deaths and missing migrants in recent times. and you insisted on this as well at the end of your contribution. It goes to show that we need to act swiftly in our respective states in order to put an end to these tragedies. Now, let's take a
Dear colleague and dear friend, my name is Tarek Ibrahane. I'm honored to serving as the President of the 3rd October. It is deeply humanity and deeper sense of duty that I speak you today in this chamber that is symbolized of both heart and conscience of Europe. I want to begin thank you for this invitation, and above all of this opportunity today we bring the table a topic that has for so long been kept at a margin of the switching debate. The identification of migrants who die at the European border, seeing in this issue finally acknowledged and addressing within framework of the Council of Europe is an important signal on the goals beyond a symbolism. It is recognition that alongside the right of the living, there is also the duty of the dead to reset their name, to honor their history, to return dignity to those who lost not only in life but in days. This duty is not abstract. It is a moral, it is a legal, and it is a urgent. As this Council itself has affirmed Resolution 2569 in 2014 and Recommendation 2284 in 2014, cooperation between state and non-state actors is essential to protect the right dignity for all people, whether in life or in the state. Comité 3 October, born from a duty and from the pain. It was born from the horror of the shipwreck of Lampedusa in 2013, where 368 people, women, men, children, lost their life. It was born from a need to not forget, to give back, even a symbolical face, name, history. Because no human being in life or in death should be disappear into nothing, and to remain without identity, without being a remember, soon become a mission, political, cultural, and humanitarian. We engage young people. We fight institutions ensure. We call attention to the truth that inconfrontable. This crisis is not only human, it is a systematic. Why does this fight matter so deeply? Because we can no longer afford difference. Right now, across Europe, thousands of migrants live without name, in mass grave, in isolation cemeteries, in that never speak to each other. This absence of the death certificate is not just emotionally, it's devastation of family. It is mean they cannot access legal documents that cannot settle inheritance matter. They do not know whether to the roam or to keep searching. They live in prison in an ending waiting. Why does this happen? Let us be honest. Because there are a double standard. We have a double standard. When European citizens die in mysterious circumstances, including shipwreck, the systems are activated. Investigation beginning. Families are supported. Justice is sought. But when immigrants die, the file is often closed before it's open. The body becomes no one, and the family becomes no one. This is not just a moral, it is a failure. It is a legal and civil failure, a battery of Europe's own values, yet The post of scarce resource there is hope. Together with Labanov, the University of Milan, within a work of many grassroots organizations, we have made impossible to possible. We have identified dozens of victims. We have traced family crossing continent. We have helped a collect crossing match ante-mortem and post-mortem. That we have written name to anonymous, to tombs, like Waldo Robel. Maybe you can see it. Waldo Robel, whose grave in Sicily had no name for 11 years. I think like Rahel, who during our annual Giornata della Memoria dell'Accoglienza discovered her sister Dina had died in 2013 shipwreck. She was able to find her, to say goodbye, to begin healing. But there are so many more names, Wahid, Rafat, Hatim, so who family are still waiting and still searching. Maybe I would like to hear the history of Rahel. That can let you understand a little, and then I can go ahead. You take the, because the voice can't hear. You can starting.
Show it. So I came here to find her body for my niece. Dina Funot, her name. Then she lived in Eritrea. When she's left from back home, she didn't tell us anything. Then when she's going in Sudan, we know about that. She's in Sudan after 3 weeks. When she's going to Libya, she's calling me, I'm in the Libya. But I don't know. I said, what are you doing? You know, I'm going. Okay. When I see, I didn't ask her anything, but I want to ask her one question that time. How you swimming that, if you go that by boat? That's why I say that, because we know this, it happened. So, no, it's fine. I want to try it. So, she's the last one I speak to her this, before 2 days when she's the boat. All of them, they survived. They know her.
Okay.
So I called for one, our friends, her brother, he's survived. So I was asking him, do you know about this, anything about Dina? He didn't tell me, he don't want to tell me then that time. No, just tell me please, I need to know. They didn't find her body. I mean, that time, I want to ask because they watch them for everyone, innit? They didn't give you proper information, you know? But you need to find by yourself to contact like Tarek or someone else. But you can find easily to find the information.
Let us be clear. This cannot remain to the brunt of civil society alone. We cannot allow the identification of human remains to depend on the passion of the voluntary. This is a duty of the institution of state and Europe. That's why on the 10th of April, we present a concrete joint proposal to the European Parliament, written together with ASJ and with Labanov, to create a European system for identification disabled migrants. Our proposal, including 5 key demands. 1, harmonized national procedure for the identification of disabled persons. 2, centralized European database that cross-reference post-mortem and ante-mortem data. 3, dedicated Europe body for missing persons. 4, national support hub for affected family. 5, guarantee individual traceability, dignity, and privacy. This proposal is both culmination of a year's struggle and advocacy, and starting point for a concrete action, because right now we are living in a legal void, a vacuum where no binding standard exists. And so the responsibility is avoided. Every state does it different or not all. Every day, the rights of the family are denied by inaction or in silence. We know that soft law instruments exist. We know that many national constitutions, including procedural guarantee for the dead and their family, are, and yet, when decided is an immigrant, these protections are too often ignored. What we ask is not a dream, it is a justice. We need a legal accountability that turns a moral obligation into a legal one. I want to close not just with a call, but with an image. Imagine a mother somewhere in Eritrea, in Syria, in Afghanistan. She had no heard from her son 8 years. No confirmation, no grave, just a name held in silence. Every knock on the door still makes her rise. She cannot mourn. She cannot move on. She cannot breathe. She wait and wait. We owe it to there and all thousands like her to break this silence, to end this waiting. We will continue our work with the same passion and the same determination. But we need you. Really, we need you. We need you, this assembly, to be not a weakness, but a partner, to carry our work forward, to support our proposal, we already put it in the European Parliament, to build a data exchange, to foster dialogue between states, to return principle into procedure, to return promise to action. We can no longer accept it European, where thousands vanish without trace. We can no longer abandon the people who love them. In Europe, Europe has the tools. Now, it must find the political and the courage. The time to act is now. And thank you a lot. Sorry of my English. I saw it's so much important for me this day. We need to work together. We know there is a lot of discussing around. We see this double standard. I know my colleague IUM, but that I want to explain to you. Until now, we don't have a European database. You know, there's a statistic of IUM, there's a statistic of other organizations, but if you ask Italy, Malta, how many body they have been getting, there's no that exist. There's no exist, no body. Not exist. It becomes like a lottery. It means that it's important, guys. Really, it's so important. Thank you a lot. Take a lot of time.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Brand.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brand. That was very clear. You're right. It's up to institutions and states to implement the same mechanisms when shipwrecks take place, wherever the boat has come from. And we parliamentarians, I think, have a particular duty to turn to our respective states and the powers that be in the member states of the Council of Europe and see to it that these principles be enshrined in the law and that we no longer have this double standard situation. Thank you very much for presenting to us the very important work you do. Let me give the floor immediately to Mr. Florian von Koenig, working for the Central Agency of Missing Persons of the ICRC. Over to you.
Manuela, thank you to all the previous speakers, in particular to Tarek. Your depiction of the situation of a mother who doesn't know the situation of the fate of her child is really what we encounter in so many places around the world, and the way you've described it, this is really what is happening, and this is ultimately what should move all of us to act on this. So thank you for that. Thank you also to Julian Palke and of course the Parliamentary Assembly for having prepared and then adopted what is one of the most comprehensive instruments on this topic. It may be non-binding, but it is so rich in recommendations that it really ranks among the best documents we have right now internationally on this. And I'm a bit of an optimist here. I don't work quite as long as Julia on the issue, but just in the 6-7 years that I've worked on the issue, 6-7 years ago, this meeting would not have been possible. So really kudos to you for bringing so many different constituencies, from governments to parliaments to international actors and to families, all in the same room. This is what needed, and this is quite unique. And I hope that we can make full use of this rare opportunity. Now, just to explain, as the ICRC, we do not encourage or discourage migration. We simply look at it as a phenomenon that has humanitarian consequences. And that is what we're interested in. And these consequences, they intersect with our mandate for two reasons. They intersect, as Julia just described in your upcoming report, with the fact that so many missing migrants are actually linked to conflict, whether that is because they come from conflict zones or whether it is because they go missing in countries that are affected by conflict. It is a huge factor, and it directly links to our work. And secondly, it links to our mandate. There is a long-standing mandate for the entire history of the ICRC, in fact, to work on missing persons. That's something that we do all around the world, that we do with 190 national societies, Red Cross and Red Crescent societies, and that we do in conflict situations, migration, after disasters, etc. And obviously that has allowed us to accumulate a lot of knowledge that is in fact transferable between different contexts. Now, we've heard the numbers. The numbers are staggering, but the scale of the issue is not the only measure of its gravity. So for a missing migrant who is alive, and I think it's important to note that a lot of missing migrants aren't necessarily dead. They can be alive, they can be in detention, they can be in hiding, or they can be unaccompanied minors who have lost contact with their families. It becomes a question of protection. Where missing migrants are dead, it has been repeated many times, a question of dignity. And for the families, it has a huge impact. It has a psychological impact of not knowing the fate. It has an economic impact of losing a breadwinner, and it has a host of administrative and social impacts on family. So this is also a measure of the gravity of the issue. This conference seeks to give impetus to efforts to implement the resolution. And so what I would like to do is very briefly to provide thoughts from the perspective of the ICRC, a humanitarian actor, on three aspects: on the who, the what, and the how. And I will repeat a lot of things that have been said, which is a good thing because it means that a lot of us are actually converging in terms of our recommendations. The first question is, who needs to act? And the fact that I think of the four keynote speakers here today are representing international or non-governmental civil society organization, it might mislead one to assume that this is an issue that can be taken care of by humanitarian actors. But this is not the case. It is above all an issue of state obligations and human rights that requires capacities, many of which only states have. Nobody can substitute for these capacities. So organizations like the ICRC or any other non-state actor cannot conduct identifications of deceased migrants. These are legal acts. We do not have access to immigration databases or detention registers that might hold crucial information on missing migrants. And of course, we cannot change policies or practices that increase the risk of migrants going missing. What we can do is to provide advice and expertise. We do this on, for example, forensic practices, medical legal systems all around the world. We can facilitate cooperation between states, and we can act as intermediaries. That's a very important function between migrants and their families and state authorities, because often there's very little trust, and it's one of the main barriers to successfully addressing cases of missing migrants, bridging this lack of trust to state authorities. The second issue is the what needs to be done. And from our perspective, and this has been mentioned before, the response must address the aspect of prevention, search identification, and the needs of affected families. And we need to admit that many disappearances, most disappearances, are preventable. The fact that migrants go missing is often the direct or indirect consequence of migratory policies or border management practices. As these become more restrictive, migrants have to opt for ever more treacherous routes. On search and identification is a challenge that requires measures at national and transnational level. Not all missing are deceased, some are in detention, some are in hiding. And our search strategies must reflect this. And I think it's important to know when we talk about searching for a missing migrant, it can be people who are faced with a body that needs an identification. But for many, many people, it is families who are searching. Yeah? There are two ways to search, and it's important that governments and public policies integrate these two ways. You don't always start with a dead set of human remains. You start with tens of thousands of families who are hoping for support in countries of transit and countries of destination for their search. Efforts to recover, document, and identify the dead require cooperation between different state authorities, and this can include municipalities, coast and border guards, the police, judicial and medical legal authorities, and it requires the harmonization and the centralization of information at national level. And of course, affected families need to be supported. They hold critical information to the identification. You cannot identify a person usually without having information from their families. And it's also important to acknowledge that families can be in countries of origin, but they can also be migrants themselves. So families find themselves in countries of transit, in countries of destination. Their migration status might differ from case by case, and all of this needs to be taken into account if we want to build effective engagements that support families. And of course, they may have lost their breadwinner, so they face huge economic challenges. And we encounter many places where a wife may be left without a husband and she no longer has guardianship over her children. She may not have access or control over property. They're very concrete challenges that are often easy to address through legislative or administrative measures. The third point is the how. Addressing the fate of missing migrants and their family poses a whole set of challenges, and some are simple and others are really complex. But I think what is important to understand is we know what to do today. It's not a question of it's too complicated, we don't know what to do, we have to study it. No, we know exactly what to do, and there's so many people today in this room that know what to do. So our main challenge is not know-how, it is the question of political will, and it's the question of resources. And I don't need to mention, but the double standard that you mentioned is a very real reality that we need to face. Now, when it comes to prevention, we know that law enforcement and interdiction-driven approaches are not on their own effective ways to reduce missing migrant numbers. They're not. What is needed are humanitarian approaches that identify and address migrant vulnerabilities. And too often, we see states arguing that interdiction approaches are an effective way to address the missing migrant problem. Interdiction and law enforcement are solutions to a lot of issues, but missing migrants require also a humanitarian approach. When it comes to search and identification, this may be one of the most high-powered meetings I've ever been to in terms of the expertise here in this room. I think it's important to acknowledge this. We have representatives from the Argentine forensic anthropology team who have set up national databases containing DNA of families in various Central American countries that are actually jointly administered by state authorities, by ministries, together with affected families and civil society. So there are models that are working today in other countries, and they can serve as inspiration for the Council of Europe region. We have medical, legal, and judicial practitioners here from different countries who can really pinpoint shortcomings in their own legal and administrative frameworks. We have police and disaster victim identification experts here from Greece and elsewhere who have overseen very, very successful identification efforts. And we even have, I believe, representatives of National Red Cross societies here that cooperate with their peers in 190 countries to restore family links. So this is all here right now. On the very important issue of transnational cooperation, as already mentioned, the Rabat process, which brings together around 57 European and African countries, has set up a network of national focal points on missing migrants. Several of them are here today, not only from Europe, but also from Africa, and this is critical. We cannot have a conversation on missing migrants without having countries of origin and countries of transit partaking in this discussion. Thank God that this is the case. So this is a very concrete structure that exists today. Switzerland and the Gambia have been two countries who've really been driving this. It is now part of the recommendations made in the resolution. It is also a recommendation of the UN Secretary General that Julia Black alluded to, and we really hope that this meeting also can serve to reinforce the concept of focal points and also to brainstorm on how to make interactions between these focal points more operational. To conclude, the most important question that we, and it's been said before, need to collectively confront is really whether we can normalize the fact that tens of thousands of people have died or gone missing and are continuing to do so on the doorstep of Europe and even within, legally, morally, and from a perspective of our shared humanity. There is only one answer. And parliaments and governments across the Council of Europe area have critical roles in this regard, and this event offers a unique opportunity to strategize on precisely what to do on this. And I would just like to reaffirm that the ICRC, with our long-standing experience and global presence and Red Cross and Red Crescent Society around the world, can be important partners in this endeavor, and very much look forward to continue working on this together with everyone here in this room. So thank you very much.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you very much, Mr. von Koenig. You're quite right. There are best practices. We know how to go about it. We have texts, conventions. We have signed the ECHR. So our member states have to respect their commitments, and the best practices that are there should be fully implemented. And this conference today and tomorrow helps us understand this highly political problem, and we need to make headway. Thank you. Let's gather